People are rolling in, but we're super casual. I actually love the banter because I love making the connections.
Yeah.
All roads lead to Adrian. It's no doubt that he was been a real figure in politics, in business, in the world of tennis, in the track and field world. But you meet people that are inspiring and share a similar mindset, and it's pretty amazing that I remember the first time ICL, had the school hadn't even gotten off the ground. I told Adrian, what I'd intended. And right away, he's like, you got to talk to this person. And he's the ultimate connector and wanting, he's a champion of education. And it's actually super exciting. I know people here, and I see a lot of people coming on, are very excited about Novak, because our next speaker is going to be Novak's coming on
Oh,
board. But,
cool. Cool, cool,
but
cool.
I would argue that Adrian is almost like a godfather of ICL in a lot of ways. Our first ICL speaker ever, 23 years ago, was Dahani Jones as a rookie, who we're now all
Oh, wow.
tight with, who I lived with for a long time, and my passion for tennis, uh, passed on Adrian. There are a lot of different ways to introduce Adrian. I like to go, incredible father first. Getting from hitting with your son in Palo Alto when he was 16 years old, to see him go through Michigan and dominate, the ranks of college tennis, and now being in the big bad world of the pros is pretty amazing. And you have another son and a daughter, and just that growth mindset, that champions mindset. I know that ICL, our mantra of building champions for life, is something that resonates with you, in what you've done, and how you put that athlete mindset into everything you do. So for those of you that weren't aware or didn't read why you're showing up to the webinar, Adrian Fenty is, you know, not only an incredible athlete, trained lawyer, businessman, entrepreneur, but was actually a incredibly inspiring political figure, which is hard to say these days in the world we live in, that you can have someone that really goes and wants to affect change. And when he was mayor of DC, in our world as educators, I mean, you pushed all the boundaries, right? You said status quo was not good enough. You said, you know, the system needs a change. You fought really for kids and for everyone to be able to have, quality education, and really went across political aisles and made a huge impact on education. And your passion for it is unreal. Your background is in athletics and track and field, and seeing what you do for your kids. And I tried to keep up with you once or twice on a run, and I fell very short. So I'm going to sub in for Dr. Lake, because I had to bring in a head of school who could one up everyone at ICL as our Olympian. So really happy to have you. Thanks so much for taking the time and being here.
Yes, thank you for having me and happy to have a conversation here.
Dr. Lake, I go way back with Adrian, and it's Black History Month. It is full, as a history major, I think tying in history is so important, in everything we do. And obviously, the secret sauce of that champion's mindset. And we always say that building a champion for life isn't about being ranked number one. It's about how you can champion a cause, how you can lead with character, how you can take all the lessons in training, in that champion mindset, and apply it to anything you do. So take my first question is just take me back to when you grew up, because deciding to go into public service is a massive commitment. I mean, I know your background. You interned for a long time. You ran for smaller offices. You got, all the way to mayor of DC. And, how did that switch from being, a high level student athlete? Wow. How did you become passionate about, public service?
For me, I've always been a political junkie in that I love I kind of love the science of politics, and the the human interaction. I like, how you have to try to um you have to try to work a bill through in order to get it passed. I like that always was of interest to me. Um, and then so I went to law school with the goal of becoming a legislative lawyer, someone who wrote laws behind the scenes for elected officials. And then when I bought a house with my wife at the time in uh, when we were in our late 20s, then I just started going to the civic association meetings in our neighborhood. And as a young man, again, kind of late 20s, I was considerably younger than most of the people who went to the Civic Association who were retirees. And so they were kind of glad to have a younger person who was a homeowner get involved. And they promoted me to Civic Association president. And as you mentioned, I then ran for kind of really small positions in the neighborhood, and then that led to running for city council, which I won, and then that led to running for mayor.
Wow. I mean,
Yeah.
so the word civic, it's funny, but most people that are in ICL, and you probably don't know the statistics, but when we first talked and I said I was to start the school, it was like, hey, we're going to pilot with some tennis players and, start with 30 kids. We're just shy of 500 now. So we're in kind of that growth, but many people don't know what ICL is. And the ICL is the Institute for Civic Leadership. And
Hmm.
I think the word civic and civic mindedness is kind of misconstrued. It doesn't it sort of seems antiquated right now. And I'd love when someone says civic leadership to you, because you embody that, right? And how important is that, in today's world for kids? I feel like it's sort of just gone by the wayside a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you overcomplicate it, then that's part of the problem. Like everybody should be civically involved, is the way I tend to think about it. So, um, like everyone should know when their civic association meeting is. Like if you live in a neighborhood, like the neighborhood you live in, they have a civic association in this country. Like I talk to people who, they complain a lot, and a lot of times I'll say to them, do, do you do you go to your civic association meetings? And then they'll look at me and I can tell they don't even know what I'm talking about. And I will say to them, you don't even know when your civic association meeting is. You've never been one time. So you're sitting here complaining about everything, but you're contributing absolutely nothing, to your community. And in that way, I just try to show them and so the funny thing about an elected official, be it President Biden or be it Mayor Bass, the mayor of LA, at one point in time, they were not an elected official. At one point in time, they were just like all the people who complain about politicians. They were just unelected. They were just citizens, and they decided that they were going to get involved and help to make decisions and be leaders in their community. So, I'm the first one to criticize a politician that's not doing anything. But as I tell people, a politician, even a bad politician, is better than someone who does nothing.
I,
So if you're
I
just sitting on the sidelines complaining, then I don't care. I don't care. The bad politician is better than you because at least, as Teddy Roosevelt said, at least they're in the arena.
the man in the arena leads, and that's it's interesting because our mantra at ICL, we have these 6 Ps. Like, how do you take a passion and then make it a purpose? And then, so I kind of want to understand to ultimately understand the process. Like what we're trying to do is have speakers like yourself sort of, what are lessons learned, a bit of a roadmap. So when did you kind of say, all right, I have a passion for this, but when did it become your purpose? Like when was it like this is something I'm switched on? I want to dedicate myself to do this.
Yeah. So honestly, the the key thing for me, it was working on other people's campaigns. That was the most, that was the jump start to getting involved in politics. Buying the house, going to the civic association meetings were big parts also. But working on campaigns is how I really learned. And everybody everybody can work on a campaign, and everybody should work on a campaign in your life, because you will really learn what's going on in your community. You'll learn a lot about politics, and you'll learn it in a concentrated period of time. Like, and these days I invest in technology startups, which are really fast moving and fast growing. And I tell people that like a political campaign is like a technology startup, but with an end date. So you're like, you have to start from scratch. And when I started my campaigns, I had zero employees and zero money, but I knew when the election date was. So we had to like get in office, hire people, raise money in what would sometimes be like 8 months or 15 months. But
It's
so work on campaigns, it's exhilarating. When you lose, you'll learn a ton. When you win, you'll learn a ton, and it'll be exhilarating.
so then I'll talk about the process because obviously as a trained lawyer, great student, but that athlete mindset, because you're always an athlete. I've known you now for quite some time. I mean, you have that definition of an athlete mentality. How did you take what you learned as an athlete, when you took a passion, you sort of found a purpose, and you started to create a process? As looking back now to someone that either wants to be an entrepreneur or a politician, like how do you use that athletic mindset in creating the right process to follow?
Yeah, so a couple of things. So like Bobby Kennedy said, he said a couple of things that I always remember, but he said, um, you can't get back at the end of a campaign what, any day that you miss or any hour that you miss. So what he was saying is basically you have to leave it all on the court. You have to spend every hour of every campaign giving it your all, which is very similar to an athletic mindset. You know what I mean? Like you said, you're having Novak on next. The people who are the best in athletics, a Kobe Bryant or someone like that. I mean, they spend hours and hours and hours practicing because they know that if they don't, they'll never have the success that they want. So that was something I kept in mind. Even before that, like when it came down to deciding whether I was going to run for city council, which was in my big campaign onto the Washington D.C. stage and a little bit on the national stage, there was a woman in office who was a powerful incumbent. She'd been in office for 21 years and had a sizable war chest, and everyone was afraid to run against her. And I asked other people. I didn't have to be the one who ran. Like I said, I liked working on other people's campaigns. But when everyone else was afraid, or they said that they would wait until the next campaign, I said, no way. I said, there's no way. She's been there 21 years. No one should be in office for 21 years and not get challenged. That's just going to ensure that the city doesn't work as well as it should. And so I remember thinking to myself very clearly then, and I can remember it now. This was, 1999 or whatever. That if I don't run against her, I'm not going to be able to sleep with myself. And so I decided that, I was going to run, so I would never have any regrets about not running. And then the minute I did, I took into account what Bobby Kennedy said, and which is what a lot of athletes say, which is, honestly, I didn't care whether I won or I lose, but I told myself, on when the votes are counted, I want to know that I've done absolutely everything to win.
That is a great. I mean, it's funny. A question popped up from one of our students who's here. It said, did playing a sport contribute to adding like that drive to your political junkie path? So obviously, you kind of answered that, you
Well,
know,
there's one other thing I'll say. So the sports that I do are endurance sports, running, biking, swimming. My dad opened up a triathlon store when I was in junior high school, almost 40 years ago now. And so I've always thought of myself as someone who, if nothing else, I can wear somebody down. And it's funny because I've already referenced Bobby Kennedy a couple of times. So the reason why I referenced him is because when I was in no one in my family is in politics. My parents were hippies, so they advocated from the outside, but no one really was ever on the inside of a government. So I had to figure it all out for myself. So like I knew I was getting into politics very young. So I started reading about the Kennedys because Jack Kennedy is the youngest president ever, and his brother was 7 years younger as the attorney general, and they started when they were in their late 20s. So I figured, these guys, I'll learn something by reading about them. And so one of the things I remember was them saying that the Kennedys treated campaigns like an athletic event. They treated it like they were going to just basically outlast everyone, like Novak does on the court. You know what I mean? Or a marathoner, Kipchoge or somebody on the marathon course. So one of the strategies towards winning a political campaign, especially at a city level, is going door to door. And so, and I didn't have any money, and I had no name recognition. So by working on other campaigns, I knew how valuable having a sign in someone's yard was, um, both as advertising and kind of winning their votes. So, and those don't cost very much. I think they would cost like $2, maybe $3 20 years ago. And so what I decided was I was just going to knock on everybody's door in the entire district. So that was definitely over 10,000 doors, 10 to 20, 15,000 doors. I
that's
was going to do that. And everyone who said they would vote for me, I'd ask them if I could put a sign in their yard. And it really became like this kind of movement almost. It was like kind of grassroots energy at its finest. So we would put up these green signs that had my name on them, and one day you would start to see one sign, and then maybe a month later you may see 100 signs, and a month later you may see 1,000 signs. And that's kind of how you go about winning a campaign when you have a lot less money than your opponent, and a lot less name recognition. You just figure out a way.
multiplier effect. Along the way, we obviously believe in gaining perspective and the people around you that help guide you. And again, who are the people that you've mentioned, the Kennedys, your parents, are there people on that journey when you find your purpose that you can look at, that lessons and takeaways that still live with you or guided you throughout that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So like, yeah, so once I started getting involved in politics, I started meeting people who were in it. And I tell you, I met a lot of people on campaigns and met the politicians, and I was really learning at warp speed then. It's like drinking concentrated orange juice. I mean,
Jolt.
you're learning so fast, you don't even know you're learning. Um, but then once I started to get deeper into it, particularly in the campaign. So this is when I learned that the best people to learn from is someone who does it before. Like if you were going to go play college tennis like you did, you know, the best person to talk to is someone who's played college tennis before, right? And so when I decided to run for city council, I talked to people who run for city council before, both people who had won and people who had lost. And it was really interesting because I would get advice from a lot of people, and the other people, like almost all the advice they gave me was not helpful. But the people who had ran before, whether they won or lost, wow, their advice was so, so helpful. So now when I'm advising tech company CEOs, I tell them, listen, listen to me, listen to the other venture capitalists, but most importantly, talk to people who have actually run a company, ones who are running it now, ones who are running before, because you'll learn the most. And that's going to be true for your students, people, if you, when they're going to college or playing sports or get their first job, talk to people who've done it before. You'll learn most from them.
Isn't that amazing that it seems basic, but what you're saying is actually really profound that, people that offer advice, but walk in someone's shoes and people are also always they're pretty open and willing to give advice, right? I mean, I have a joke as an entrepreneur that started and sold a company. I always joke, I said, buy me lunch, I'll save you $2 million. It's like,
Yeah.
I mean, really, like, in that world, it's kind of funny that way where, you look at it and as you go through it, you gain, and I'm sure what I would always joke that the beginning, you have all that energy, but over time, because this didn't happen to you overnight. I mean, this was you were still a new kid on the block, but then once, we always joke in sports too, like when do you go from being like a rookie to then a vet? Like what, like it's almost like you're young or you're old. Like there's no like in between, right? Did you feel as you went on and then ultimately, in gaining the position that you did, I mean, being mayor of DC and sort of not unabashedly being you, was there a game plan or, when you did finally get in there and you were in the mix, on a much bigger level, what were some of the things, that did you feel like that youth, or you felt like you had the experience, or how, what did it feel like and what was your plan when you decided to take on these big issues like education reform?
Yeah. So, yeah, no, I always thought, as I started to say with my parents, so they were hippies and they never ran for government, but they were involved in that way. I always wanted to be the person, the outsider who somehow tricked people into letting them in the inside. That's the way I thought about it. Like I wanted to be on the inside, but I wanted to make decisions just like I was just like someone who'd never gotten elected. And very often when I would make my votes on the city council, I was on the city council for 6 years. Very often I would say to myself, if all 70,000 of my residents were sitting here on this dais, like, what would they do? Like, so like famously or infamously voted against the baseball stadium, right?
Uh,
Coming to DC. And it wasn't that I was against baseball or stadium, of course. Who would be? And I love the Nationals. But in my mind, giving any public money, certainly hundreds of millions of dollars to build a baseball stadium, when the schools were in the physical condition they were in, was was not something I could support. And that's one of those votes I said to myself, if the 70,000 residents of my ward were sitting here and they had the facts that I had, and they knew the conditions of the schools and the rec centers, and to be honest with you, the library, everything was in, yeah, when we voted on that in 2004 or whatever it was, the schools were in horrible condition, as they are in a lot of cities. And there was no way I could vote for it. Even if you told me all the businesses supported the tax that would build the stadium, I was like, no, the city council has to set the priorities for the city. And priorities of the city, baseball is on there, but there are a lot of things above that. And we weren't doing a good job on those. So I voted no. And there was other things like that. I mean, I did that all the time. I had no problem being a one vote out of 13. In fact, to be honest with you, sometimes that was my guiding light. Sometimes I thought that, like, I know this is a city council where everybody slaps each other's back, just like all the other legislatures, and that's how you get things done. So, you know, if I'm not a 1 against 12 vote, or two out of 11 or 3 out of 10 very often, then I'm just slapping people's backs also, and I'm not standing up for things.
So now you're out. It's funny. Do you look back? I mean, you obviously apply the same lessons that we're talking about into being a venture capitalist, a dad, a father of athletes is huge. I mean, I don't know if you even knew what you were getting into in the tennis world, like
Right.
from early days, right? But in raising kids, but also you're now like over a decade sort of out of it. You can
Yeah.
kind of step back. Do you look back at that time? Were there things you may have done differently? Or are you like proud of it? Is there anything? Because it was a pretty integral time. I mean, bringing in Michelle Rhee, and I mean, I remember waiting for Superman like yesterday. I still show it in schools, and like it's yeah. Do you any thoughts on kind of looking back now?
Um, well, taking over the schools, I after my kids, to be honest with you, I mean that's when I'm on my deathbed, there's no question that that will be the thing that I'm most proud of doing. And I mean, there's for some perspective, first of all, like in the Western Hemisphere, not even just in our country, but North, South America, um, like wherever there's a democracy, there's only like three places in the entire world where the mayor is control of the schools. It's Chicago, New York, and Washington, D.C. And if Chicago did it in, I think they did it in like 5 years, and Bloomberg did it in three, and we did it in 6 months. Right. On
Wow.
June 12, 2007, which is 5 months and 12 days after I took office, I took over the school system. Thanks to Bloomberg and Daily, because they had set the precedent. And what we decided then was, DC had a school system that was not unlike most urban school systems. It just was not educating its kids, and we just the way it should. And what we just decided and said was that education is going to be our highest priority, and it's not even going to be close. And if we're going to be a world-class city, we have to have a world-class education system. And the passing of the buck has to stop. The mayor has to be in control and hold me accountable and hold the next mayor and the next mayor accountable after them. So so that's what we did. We took over the school system. There were a lot of very tough, controversial decisions that we needed to make. Um, there's none that I would take back. And as Joel Klein, the former chancellor of New York City Schools, said, if you ask me if I would do anything different, the only thing I would do different is move even faster.
It's funny you just said that because when we started the Institute for Civic Leadership, we were Mayor Bloomberg's third public address as mayor.
Oh,
Um,
that's amazing.
and then he came back and opened up our Dare to Dream conference for 3 years. And in year two, with a little guy named Tahani Jones, I have photos actually on my wall right now. Joel Klein came in and said, what ICL is doing, this is the type of innovation in education that needs to happen. And like the system as it was didn't really allow for innovation in a lot of ways. Like it had to go through so many hoops. It had to be, I mean, you know it, we've talked about it before, just to pierce this sort of veil, like that's something that is so important that should be on the forefront of innovation for it to take so long and be so antiquated doesn't correlate, right? When you're trying to impart skills on the next generation to allow them to excel in jobs of the future, but your system is backwards. So, I mean, I kind of teed that up because I don't think people here understand. And in starting a school, managing one school, but to land in your lap to say we're going to overhaul the entire system of one of the biggest cities, in the world is a daunting task. And I think just again that champion's mindset. Like I don't
Yeah.
think any, if you didn't have that sportsman, that athletic gene, I don't think I think people would shy away from it, or it's impossible. But I do have a lot of questions. I want to also turn over to Anthea. Sorry to dominate the time. I don't get to see Adrian enough, so I'm sort of dominating it. But Dr. Lake wanted to bring you in here as well.
Hi, yeah, so I've got quite a few questions that the students wanted to know the
Oh,
answers to.
terrific. Yes.
Because at the moment in mentorship, one of the things that they're actually looking at is how can they become a leader? And one of the things I've been saying to them is that, the younger children coming up now are looking up towards them. So they have got a few questions to ask you. So some of them are quite random, but you know,
I will
students,
do should we
whatever
do our
comes
speed
to their head.
dating round? Yeah, we're almost that time where I don't want to take too much of Adrian's time, but we call it kind of speed dating for questions like
Okay, sure,
get
yeah.
put on,
So,
but
one of them is, when did you consider yourself a success?
oh, that's a big one.
You know, so I don't ever think of myself as a success. To be honest with you, you know, like they say in sports, that's for other people to judge. For me, the goal is always just to get things done. And having grown up in DC when the government didn't get a lot of things done, that was even more important. And then like people don't see governments as places where they should have like be as effective as like private companies. And I think the opposite. I think so. I want my government to to have even more productivity than the private sector. When Jack Kennedy became president in 1961, he had this saying that he was going to hire the best and the brightest, and that's the way we approach government. I would hire people who, had great degrees and who would come from great private sector places and who weren't afraid to take chances and take risks. But again, so for me, success is for someone else to judge, but when you're in charge of something, you should really just be focused on getting results. And that was my focus then in the government, and now that's my focus now in the private sector.
Okay, thank you. And also they're asking, how do you push yourself through your worst times, assuming you've had some?
I mean, to be honest with you, if I don't start the day with a workout, it's my day is a lot tougher. Um, so when I was mayor, the funny thing is I would very, very often work out twice a day. I work out at 6 o'clock for a run, like a real run, any between 5 and 10 miles with a group of people. And then I would come back, take my twin sons to school. They were quite young, and they were between 6 and 10 years old when I was mayor. And I took them to school because I knew that once I dropped them off and started my workday as mayor, my day could get hectic and I may not even be back before they went to bed. So I wanted to make sure I had that time with them. So I'd take them to school and then I'd be off to my first meeting, which would be 8:30 or so. And then I would work for like 3 or 4 hours, and then it'd be so fast paced and so stressful in a way that I would need another workout. And I work out again midday. I never took a lunch the 4 years I was mayor. If like how mayors are kind of like famous for going on like 2 hour lunch, I never did. And if someone invited me to a lunch I couldn't get out of, I would go for the beginning and like make a speech, and then I would leave and go work out. And so I would do that, and then that would reset my brain and I'd feel like I'd done something for myself, and then I would go back and work from like 2 till like 9 o'clock. So that was always how I both avoided, kind of getting down on myself or having bad times, or how I responded to them.
So amazing. I know to follow up on that because you're speaking to a lot of people who are aspiring athletes,
Yeah.
and we talk about passion to purpose, but what we're really about is kind of the super purpose, right? Like, it's you can want to be number one in the world, but why? That we have so many lessons now from the Agassiz of the world. We're like, I thought I was doing it for this, but I got reset when I realized I was doing it for other people. And so that idea of civic engagement, social entrepreneurship, you know, that that high of knowing you're helping other people, like you're benefiting others. Can you describe, because I mean, obviously there's nothing greater than public service. I mean, you're in it to make other people's lives better, right? To affect positive change. How would you, I mean, again, you are speaking to a lot of students and families here. you know, it's a different world. It's a super fast-paced world. You're working in tech, you're seeing things go. Things have changed from when you and I were in high school. It's a lot different, you know, time, energy. I mean, there's really a different way. Do you think, you know, if you're giving advice to your kids or a 15-year-old you, knowing what you know now, that someone wants to, you know, have a goal in their sport, but you know, how do you relate that to even what's beyond that, to look beyond to the greater goal, you know, that idea of how can someone who is pursuing sports now, you don't have time for everything, but wants to be civic engaged, and what advice would you give?
Yeah, well, you mentioned two people who, I think a lot of, Andre Agassi, for, I don't know what all the former tennis players have done, but, he started a school. Um, and, that is a great way to give back. I don't know if many other former professional athletes. I know like LeBron James has a school, and I've heard good things also. I've been to Andre Agassi's school. This is when we talk about results and giving back, these are real things. Um, but I think the standard bearer really is Michael Bloomberg, who you mentioned. Michael Bloomberg now, if you look it up, he's probably worth like 50 or 60 billion dollars. It's really like every time I look it up, it's kind of ridiculous. But even when I was mayor, when he was mayor of New York, he's worth like 20 billion dollars, right? So he had money to do whatever he wanted to, right? And yet he decided that he was going to run for mayor and not just be someone who stood on the sidelines and complained, but really, got involved. And you take a lot of heat and people complain at you and call you bad things when you're mayor. And yet he decided to do it anyway. And, I know a lot of people who are successful business people, and I read about a lot, but few have gotten as involved as he has. And he's shown that you can do it. And so, like, my thinking is like you should he lived his life and was a successful businessman. When he had the opportunity, he got involved in politics. I think that's the lesson. Your students here are quite young. But I did my first internship on Capitol Hill after my sophomore year in college. So I was about 18. There's always you can always volunteer for your congressman on Capitol Hill. You can always go volunteer for your city council member. It looks amazing on your resume. You'll learn so much and you're giving back. And and then I went to law school, and it wasn't very clear I would go into public service. So, but you can go in and out. For those of you who've watched the Alexander Hamilton play, which was terrific, Alexander Hamilton and his contemporaries, so they'd be in private sector for 5 years, and then they go in public sector for 5 years. Then they go back to the private sector. They just went in and out, and those were the founding fathers of the country. So you don't have to do one or the other. You can do both.
And there are tennis parents on this. So I mean, first of all, those lessons learned, that continuous, and I will say, you know, thank you for your service and that mindset. I think that the fearlessness in which you went about that also, you know, as we're talking and kids are writing things, I mean, you know, the lessons you take away, you know, that idea of not giving up, of saying, you know, don't complain about it. Look, Nike's probably the greatest slogan, right? Just do it. It's tough to compete with just do it. So I think, you know, you're an example of that. Um, any lessons learned, you know, now that you're a father of, you know, a successful tennis player, you've been through the ranks. A lot of families ask me, you don't know the process. You know, kids are really good. They're playing ITFs. They're sort of like, where do you go? You know, even as parents, should we push? Should we, how did you, because you have three very different children and you
Yeah.
raise them, and it's, um, any advice kind of in parenting? We talk about public service and helping others, the athletic gene, but now even as a parent that you would advise going through it.
Well, the one thing I know for sure is there won't be any successful, there's almost zero, statistically zero successful tennis people who didn't have at least one maniacal parent, right? At least one, like that's because you have to. I mean, in order, it's not like people talk about the money, which is obviously an important issue and everything else, but you have to literally like every Saturday morning, even if you just play local tournaments, you got to drive somewhere, have everything arranged, breakfast, you have to be maniacal to do that. And then once you start traveling, national, get plane flights, you know what I mean? If you have two kids playing, I mean, I remember when both the boys would be playing nationals, like one would be playing, I'd have to drive to another, place in Boca Raton and drive and watch half of the match to the other and go back to the other, get them lunch in between, come back. You have to be maniacal. And so, like, people make a joke sometimes about like helicopter parents and stuff like that. I'm like, well, that's true, but there's a lot of people who I know who parents probably should have been a little bit more helicopter. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I always err on the side, what I mean? I'll err on the side of I hopefully I'll err on the side of doing too much. But as a tennis parent, for me, I didn't know anything about tennis, so I had to learn every single lesson the hard way.
Well, it's amazing, and I
You'll be
apologize.
much better because you know about tennis. So with your three kids, you'll know things that you do have to do and don't have to do. I didn't know any of that, so I had to do all of them and learn it the hard way. But maybe that was better.
Exactly. Well, I think, it's interesting because that athlete mindset, they have different opportunities. I mean, I apologize that I didn't have ICL ready for your boys because I know, it's what you're saying is so true. And the sort of school verse, do you think having your experience, and this is obviously um something I'm just interested in, because back when you were mayor, like something like ICL didn't exist. I mean, online learning was at its infancy.
Yeah.
There wasn't this idea, how do you feel about the innovations now? Because you are in tech and we've been with each other at ed tech conferences. You know, at ICL, we have a mantra that says respect tradition, embrace tomorrow, right? Like great
Mhm.
teachers, the backbone of a great education is still critical, but the use of technology, I would say, can augment, like right now, if you came and did a school assembly at your kid's school, you can reach a couple hundred kids. What we're doing now can reach thousands of kids. And so, do you see the future bright, or, as you go forward, had you been able to use something like an ICL back when you were mayor, sort of as a light switch that, wow, we can go into different modalities or uh,
Yeah. Well, so when I took over the school system, somebody, I don't know who it was, I got so much advice, but one really great piece of advice they said, Fenty, don't try to build an excellent school system. Try to build a system of excellent schools. And I think that's exactly what Michelle Rhee was thinking about doing anyway. So there was 140 schools in DC. We closed like 30 of them. So we probably got down to like 110, 120. So with the goal for DC was to make every single school amazing, but they didn't have to be anything alike. That's where we were going, which is basically kind of what the charter schools uh are doing, but they do it kind of outside of a system. We were going to do it inside of a system. Either way can work. So when you, so my theory is if you do that, so in Washington D.C. we have 120 excellent schools, all where the principal in that community have the authority to kind of shape them however they want to. They're going to use all kind of innovation. They're going to use all kind of technology. Some will use more than others. Some will use different, but there will be a lot more technology. Some will partner with online. Some will do half online. Some will probably have
yeah,
schools out outside or whatever.
yeah,
But that's the goal. And so
yeah,
when
yeah.
under Michelle, like there were a couple unicorn ed tech companies that had their first big customer
With you.
was the DC school system when we were in charge of it, because she was like me. She was like, the only thing I know I'm not gonna do is the old way. because the old way is not working. So if you tell me something's new, I'm gonna try it because it's got to be better than the old way.
That's the philosophy. I mean, with ICL, we say, that respect tradition, embrace tomorrow, but it's also about how can we take what kids are passionate about, right? Like, so our mantra is engagement, application, creation. You gotta engage students. And now in this world, it's so hard when you have a whole school system, right? The DC school system, I mean, different neighborhoods, different blocks, different types of kids. There's no one size fits all. So, obviously at ICL, we're like, okay, let's go for athletes, an athlete mindset, a performer. Like, how can I guess it's easier when you only, in your situation, you had to deal with every socioeconomic, I mean, you had it all, right? So how do you take this melting pot and try to create systems? And, I think what you harped on something. I personally think the future of education is hybrid. And I think that, and I don't, and I'm, this is just my own personal questions before we end, but the concept of really, vocation is a dirty word in the US for some reason, but I'm a big believer, and what I'm hearing you say is like get the experience early, right? Like join a campaign. There's no reason that a, 15, 16, 17-year-old kid can't start getting involved or, experience, be an entrepreneur. You probably, you learn the most by doing it. I can tell you I have a lot of degrees like you do, but nothing prepared me till I ran my own company. It's like you get in there, it's like that's when the real lessons learned. So, we have aligned missions, and I think that, even your son hacking it out on tour, like those experiences are invaluable, right? Just getting out there
Totally.
and
No,
doing
I
it.
mean, listen, to be honest with you, so you said there's all athletes on the wrong. Listen, my son's what, 23, so he's one year out of college. There's there's no one working any harder than he is. Like he may now again, being a professional tennis player is, it's fun some days and it's super stressful the other day. But one thing for sure, I can be sure there's no one who's on Wall Street or no one working on Capitol Hill. He's literally working 7 days a week, hours and hours a day. As you know, that's the only way you even have a chance. So in that way, if you work that hard, there's definitely going to be something great coming out of it, even if it's just your capacity to work hard, which is going to be important for whatever he does after tennis. And there's always an after tennis or after basketball or after golf, no matter who you are. Even the best
Mhm.
barely get to 40.
Yeah, I mean, you can teach, it's so sad that Kobe died. You mentioned Kobe. I mean, you can teach semester, you can teach an entire university. There could be a Mamba University, just, what he gave. And I saw his quotes. We shared it in mentorship yesterday, Dr. Lake and I, and it was basically like he's talking about business. He's like, I want maniacal. I had the same mindset, and it's crazy. I mean, it's like, that obsessive nature, that way that like I know if I leave, like the grinding mentality. I mean,
I
obviously,
love that in Kobe's last two interviews. Yeah, I listened to a couple to them. That the thing that he got most excited about was when they asked him about his daughter. That was the most fantastic part. He talked about everything, but when they asked him about his daughter, that's when he was most excited.
I completely agree. I just got chills because sadly his daughter was getting so into tennis, and he was like just like you, like didn't know anything. He's
Oh
like, all right,
wow.
let's do this. And it was really sad. Steve Nash had organized a meeting with Tommy and
Oh,
I. I still have it on my calendar, and he was going to helicopter into Indian Wells, and it was in March. We said the day we were 9 weeks out when he passed, and we had it already booked on the calendar. But there's so much we can learn from all these greats. And look, that's what ICL, that's what we're about, right? Like take champion mentors, what you're doing right now, and then let's apply it, right? I
yeah.
mean, it doesn't mean if to talk about politics or tennis or anything. It's like these are those lifelong lessons. And we had Steve Nash do our orientation, and he's not talking to basketball players. Like it has no, what you just talked about your son. It's this is how you apply yourself, how you know take that and focus your energy with that purpose. Dr. Lake, I'm monopolizing again. We're totally running out of time. We've
I
used
know,
a lot.
I know. So
Is
in
there, yeah.
closing, sorry, one thing, as obviously this month is Black History Month. And so what the students would like you to comment on is, you know, do you have any words of wisdom as somebody, obviously you can tell I was not born and raised in the USA, but someone who was born and raised here, any words that can sum up what Black History Month means to you?
Yeah, and I should tell you, my kid's mom, all three of my kids' mom, was born in Wimbledon. My three kids have a British passport, although they're United States citizens and they play for the United States. You know what? I I just think it's great to highlight the achievements of African Americans in this country. And some people rightfully say it should be a whole year, and some people may not want it to happen at all. You know what I mean? I just love the positivity that comes out of highlighting what African Americans have contributed in this country and maybe in this world. So, you know, it probably seeped into my consciousness reading, as people told me about, African American politicians. You know what I mean? And I probably was, in elementary school and then in middle school and high school, and I probably learned about, you know, Thurgood Marshall and the first black mayors who were elected, and you know, the first black governor who came from Virginia, which is very near Doug Wilder, near me in DC. So you never know. Hey, we're teaching things in Black History Month. You teach somebody about Arthur Ashe or Francis Tiafo, and then all of a sudden they're confident they can do it themselves, or they run for mayor because they know that people have done it before them. So that's I'm a big fan. I think it's a huge positive, and I may be one example of a situation where someone it really helps someone figure out their career path.
Without a doubt. I mean, your story is inspiring. I got to give props out to all those on the thing for Dr. Lake has been sending just really great stories. I'm with you. I think those uplifting like success stories are what we should focus on. I think you read a lot about divisiveness and what's different and what sets you apart, but like success, like we want to honor and cherish the success of what is going on and have it be a beacon, that there are no limits, that especially when you decide to just do it, like they're doing it, then in
Yeah.
every corner. And what Dr. Lake is bringing out, I mean, we're not talking about, artists, politicians, I mean, and from every area, writers, I mean, it's the impact is huge. And I think it's really
Well,
important for
so
kids.
the other thing is, like, there's this old saying is you don't want to lose the forest by focusing on the trees. So, people rightfully say like there's a lot of progress still to be made. But I've been, I read a lot of books at once, and one of the books I'm reading at once is the Arthur Ashe
Days of
biography, which,
Grace.
I feel like I know a decent amount about Arthur Ashe, but it's striking for me, especially as a tennis dad, as you said, a dad of three African American, students and now players. So Arthur Ashe, who's younger than my father, I mean, there were times when he would go to junior tournaments and he wouldn't even be allowed to stay in the same hotel as everyone else playing in the tournament. The very first couple of times he signed up for a tournament, I'm pretty sure he wasn't even allowed to play. Like they say, you're not able to. I mean, that's not that long ago. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And so,
Arthur coached me. I mean,
what
he's
they
my idol. Like he's my role model. I mean, Arthur was before he passed. I mean, put a racket in my hand. He's the most inspirational. I mean, and he was that peaceful warrior. I mean, you talk about, you know, everyone learns right away. Martin Luther King Day, Black History Month, you're learning about this peaceful resistance. People understand as an athlete, Arthur was the opposite. He was not the stronger, faster. He beat you here. He was the most. I mean, I'm going to put Days of Grace, by the way, mentorship. I mean, Days of Grace I actually had to buy another copy because I used to just bring it with me everywhere because there's so much in what he experienced. And I'm so glad you brought him up
Yeah.
because it's
Without Black history, month or recognition or just even Black history in general, you forget how much progress has been made in what, in a few decades. And so if we can make that much progress in the decades going forward, or even more, there's reasons to be optimistic and not be overly negative. You've got to challenge society, but you've also got to, feel good about where we're headed to.
I love that you said that. I mean, I think that's so poignant, and that's definitely where I kind of feel like a big exclamation mark. And I want to just, for all of you there, thank you so much for joining. But that last bit, right? That we are trying to build, great human beings of tomorrow. Our goal is not how high can you get ranked. It's not, you have to get straight A's. It's, are you a person of character that can add, the mission of the ICL is to inspire, educate, and support those aspiring youth to basically have a positive impact on their local and global communities. And that's, if you really break that down and you look at exactly like how far we've come, in such a short time. And that's, the world is moving fast. And if what's happened in 20 years, before that it took 80 years or 100 years, what's going to happen in the next 10 years is probably going to blow our minds. But we have to keep, I think, focusing on that positives and really knowing that we can build, together. That Black History Month doesn't mean separation. We have to honor this. It's like, what can we build? Let's honor each other and work together. So I thank you so much, and I hope to see you at Indian Wells, and
Yeah. Yeah,
uh,
actually, I'm going to a conference that Novak Djokovic is speaking at on the 28th. I'll send you the information. It's
I
in
mean,
LA.
perfect. Let's do it. That would be great. Adrian, thank you so much.
Thank you
This
for having me.
Dr.
Okay.
Lake, you're, the best, my partner in crime. Thank you, everyone here, and look forward to seeing you in class.